our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful who will all our sorrow share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Blessed Savior, thou hast promised all our burdens thou wilt bear. May we ever, Lord, be bringing all to thee in earnest prayer. Soon in glory bright and clouded, there will be no need for prayer. Rapture, praise, and earnest worship will be our sweet portion. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. Oh, I worship you, Lord. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God. That is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God. That is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God. That is who you are. 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 That is who you are.
Without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings.
To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cost, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. And the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint.
God from all praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above you, heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Praise God from whom blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above you, heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Praise God for all that He has done. Praise Him for He has overcome. The grave is beaten, love has won. Praise God, our Savior, Christ the Son.
Okay, so this morning here I've chosen the passage of Numbers chapter 13 and 14 entitled Israel's Rebellion. And the reason I chose this passage is because I intend to preach through the book of Joshua in the future, and I thought that I needed to introduce that. And instead of getting going big time on the right in the middle of the book, I thought we would introduce it this week, since next week I don't know where we're going to be and what's going to happen the week after that yet either. So I thought we would do that today. So I'm going to introduce the book of Joshua using this passage, Numbers chapter 13 and 14, to do so. Okay? So when we see the nation of Israel, we just think about the history that we have given to us in the Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. We see that Israel was not a nation yet, but Abraham had gone down into Abraham had gone down and was sojourning around, but eventually Jacob went down into Egypt, and the people dwelt there, the Israelites dwelt there, and they grew and multiplied and became a mighty people. They had been enslaved there for over 400 years, and their cries went up to God to say, hey, you told us we are your people. You don't see what's happening with us. We're enslaved here. Help, deliver us, save us from this, if we're your chosen people. And so with that, God raised up Moses, who came, and Moses saw a burning bush, we know, in the book of Exodus. And he saw that burning bush, and he was wondering what was going on there. And it turned out that God got his attention through the burning bush and spoke to him through the burning bush. So in Exodus chapter 3, we see here that it says, the Lord said, and this is to Moses, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Right? We got that. If you've grown up in the church, you've heard of a land flowing with milk and honey. And so God had called Moses to do this, to deliver the people out of the hand of Pharaoh, out of the bondage of Egypt. And so they leave, and after a number of miracles that are performed, number of signs that God gives, They have this miraculous exit, also known as Exodus, hence the name of the book. They have this miraculous exodus out of Egypt, and they're going to go into the promised land. But before they go into the promised land, they go out of Egypt, they go into the wilderness, and during that time, God gives them the law. He gives them the law, and he establishes this covenant with his people. And he says, this is what you're going to do. You're going to follow me, and this is how you're going to show that you're following me. You're going to obey the laws, the commands that I give you. And so the people say, we'll do this. We're all in. And so as soon as that happens, even before then they started, but as soon as they just kind of recommitted, if you will, they start complaining about things. They don't like the way things are. Wow, we're out here in the wilderness. Where's the water coming from? Oh, you're going to give us this manna, manna means what is it, right? That's literally what it means. What is it? So when they saw this stuff, they said, what is it? And that's what we call manna. What is it? And it said that it was the flaky stuff there and tasted like honey wafers and coriander seed. And so that's what they lived on. But they didn't like that so much. They complained about that in their time too. They wanted some meat, so God gave them so much meat that they had it coming out of their nostrils, it says. And at the end of the month of eating quail all month, they complained about the meat. Right? Sound like anybody you know? Our kids, right? It's our kids, not us. So we're seeing this group of people and how God is dealing with them. And so God had given them the law, given them instructions to make the tabernacle, told them how you're going to set up, how you're going to camp each day. They're going to be set up, and you tribes are going to be on the north side, and you tribes are going to be on the east side, and the south, and the west. And within there, you'll have this tabernacle, and you'll have priests or Levites around there, and they're going to take care of things and minister. And you're going to leave only when the cloud moves. Once the cloud moves, then you follow the cloud, and that's where you set up. And so that's how God moved his people. So this is where we're at here as we think about what God is doing and how he's worked with his people here. And I'm going to advance eventually. Tori, I'm going to ask you, would you do that for me, please? Okay. So at the Numbers chapter 1, it says, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt. So it took some time to get all of this together. Okay. It took about a year, right? A little over a year. And so God talks to Moses at the tent of meeting, and he says, get ready. You're going to come out of, after you're going to get ready to go out of this place where you are, but I want you to take account of the people that you have. Take a census, it says in verse 2, of all the congregation of the people of Israel by clans, by fathers' houses, according to the number of names, every male head by head. So Moses begins this process. And so we start in Numbers chapter 1, and everything starts to get going. Everybody gets counted off and everything. And then it tells us that 20 days later in Numbers chapter 10, verses 11 and 12, which is what we have on the screen there, it says that then they got up. In the second year, so it's the same year, in the second month, it's the same month, but it's on day 20, the 20th day. Okay, so it's 19 days later. It says, the cloud lifted from over the tabernacle, the testimony, and the people of Israel set out by stages from the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. So they moved here now from where they were in this wilderness, and they're getting ready to go into the promised land. And that's where we come in and we see where we are here in Numbers chapter 13. But before we get there, we find out that, in Numbers chapter 13, we're going to see this person, this guy named Joshua in there as one of God's spies that he sent into the land. When I say spies sent into the land, we're going to see in Numbers chapter 13 that Moses was instructed to take one person from each of the tribes there, and that person would be a representative, and they would go into the land of Canaan, and they would spy out the land, to look at it, to see if it was a good land or not, Not because they had a choice and whether or not they were supposed to go in there or not, but how they were going to attack this problem, how they were going to go into this land and take it. And they were supposed to go into the land to see what it was like and give a report back to the people. And so one of these spies' name was Joshua, also known as Hoshea, okay, or Hoshea. And you'll see that in Numbers chapter 13 when they list the names of these representatives from each of the tribes. His name is listed there as Hoshea, son of Nun. And we find out that Moses changed his name to Joshua. Hoshea means saves, right? He saves. But Joshua means God saves. And so Moses was given a little tweak there to Joshua's name so that they would know that it is the Lord who's going to be dealing with them. It's the Lord who's going to be saving them. But we get a little introduction of Joshua as soon as they come out of Egypt. They have this battle here, and that's in Exodus chapter 17. And so we have that up there on the screen too. It says, then Amalek, which is this group of people, came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So he gives Joshua, he tells him to gather up these men, get an army together because you're going to have this battle tomorrow. And Moses is going to go stand up on top of the hill. And he's going to lift up the staff of God there, and they're going to battle, and God is going to give them the victory. And so we see in verses 10 and 11, it said Joshua did as Moses told him, and he fought with Amalek. And it said while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. So we're seeing that Joshua was obedient to do what Moses had instructed him to do, and he went out to fight. And as he's in the middle of this battle, Moses is up there like this, but Moses is getting to be an older man now, and he's feeling it a little bit there. He's over 80, okay? So we're going to have Myron stand on top of the mountain there and lift up his hands there while we do what we need to do. And well, Myron's hands get a little bit tired there. You know, Moses' arms get tired. So he has Aaron and Hur, these guys, alongside of him. So they actually pull up a rock and they put it under him and say, sit down there. And so he gets tired, you know, still his hands are going up and down. And when his hands go down, the battle goes against Joshua. When the hands go up, the battle, they prevail. And so they say, hey, we got to find a way to keep these guys' hands up here, right? And so they give him a seat and they hold up his hands. And then it says that Joshua defeats them, okay? So as God has dealt with his people there, we see right from the beginning, you know, they're crying out to him. They're saying, what's going on, God? We're your chosen people. We're in this hurt. We're in this bondage. Aren't you going to do anything about it? And one thing we can know for sure about God is that he knows our circumstances. He knows our hurt. He knows our pain. And so we don't ever want to forget that, okay? Because it's important for us to remember, because otherwise we'll feel like we're somehow or another lost. We're out there on some island by ourselves, and God has just kind of forgotten us. He doesn't know what's happening. And that's not reality, okay? So here's our introduction to Joshua. We see what kind of man this is. And we're not going to be studying Joshua's life. We're going to be looking at the book of Joshua. But we want to know, hey, what's happening here? Well, what goes on is after a while, they have to deal with some transitions there in leadership. And Moses is not going to be on the scene forever. He's going to be stepping out. And so you put in a new leader there, and Moses chooses Joshua. Actually, God chooses Joshua, but Moses is giving his blessing, if you will. And so there's a transition there that takes place, and that's where a lot of that happens in the book of Joshua. But it also is talking about how they go into what has been promised to them, this land flowing with milk and honey, this promised land that God had promised to his people. And so in those transitions, sometimes you don't know how they're going to go. And so as we go and look at the book of Joshua and we see what's happening there, we're going to see some things about how God works in those transitions and how it's not the man that's there, it's actually God who is superintending his purposes. He's sovereign. He's going to make sure that his plan gets accomplished. Because that's how he is. That's how he operates. That's who he is. He's not somebody who can't get done what he's trying to get done. So we just need to be reminded of that. So I was just thinking, as you think about transitions, any of you guys have one of these? Yeah. No, some of you use different phones there. But when the guy who invented this got going there, he passed away. And the next guy was supposed to step in and lead this big corporation, the Big Apple, right? Everybody was concerned. They thought, oh, no, this is not going to happen. This new guy, he's not as good as the other guy. He's got no creative abilities. He's just kind of a manager type of person, Well, finds out Apple's doing okay, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes we have these apprehensions about things because it's not the way we think it should go. But we don't know what God has in store. And I'm not saying that he has his blessing on Apple. I'm just talking about in general. You talk about transitions. Sometimes we think it can never be the way it was before. It's never going to be as good as it was before. Our best days are behind us. Yeah, you don't want to get to thinking like that, especially when you got some ground to cover ahead of you, Lord willing, too, So the idea of these transitions, we got to understand here that God is the one who's in control, okay? So we see that Joshua is introduced here. He goes in this battle. And then as we get and look at Numbers chapter 13 and 14, so we see him here. He's one of the spies that are listed there. So it says here in 13, 1 through 3, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the people of Israel. And like I said, it gives us a list of these different chiefs or heads of their tribes, and Joshua's name is mentioned there in verse 8, Hoshea son of Nun, and then it says in verse 16 at the end, and Moses called Hoshea the son of Nun Joshua. Okay, so there's a little name change there, and so we if you've known people who come out of maybe in the East, in Eastern religions, they usually have a name. Maybe their name means something else. But once they come to faith in Christ, they usually take on a Christian name. So, I had met a guy before, and his name was Sote. He's from Cambodia. Well, he wanted a Christian name. He became a Christian. So his name is James. Okay? Right? I kind of like Sote, but he wanted James. That's okay. So we call him James. Okay? So to identify with his Christian character here, God gives Hoshea this name. He gives him the name Joshua, which means God saves. So we see that Moses does that. He tells these guys to go and to spy out the land. And so they go into the land. And when they're in the land there, it says, as you're going in there, look and see whether the land is, and we're going to go to the next slide there, Tori. Whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are trees in it or not, be of good courage, he says, and bring some of the fruit of the land. And it says, now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So that's in verse 20. And then in verse 23 it says, and they came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them. They also brought some pomegranates and figs. And so Eshcol means cluster. Any of you have an old picture Bible, like a family Bible? We had this Bible when I was younger, and it had these pictures. And of course, before, the Bible was always like this, right? Seemingly black and white. And we had these pictures in it, and in this picture, it showed these guys, and they had this this stick there, with grapes hanging, a big giant cluster of grapes hanging on a pole between the two of them. And it was like they had come back from this land bringing back these grapes there. And so, any of you see that in your picture Bibles? Yeah. Okay. Some of us. Okay. All right. Just remember it. And it just stuck with me. The colors of those grapes were purple and big, and they were like plums. Each little grape was like the size of a plum, and I like plums, so it stuck with me, So here it is. Moses had given them these instructions there. And so they're to gather, to go and look into this land here and check it out and spy it out. And they come back and they have some, they're bringing back some of the fruit and stuff. And now they're going to give the report to the people. So there are 12 spies, and it tells us in verse 25, at the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. So they came back. They showed them what was going on there. They showed them what they had found. They talked about the land. They gave this report. And as they gave the report there, at verse 27, and they told them, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. So they're showing them this big cluster of grapes and the pomegranates and the figs. Verse 28, however, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. So these descendants of Anak are these giants, okay? Very big people who Goliath descended from and his brothers, okay? So, continuing on, the Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. So they're seeing all this, they're seeing where these people are, they're seeing the different groups of people in the land that they're going to have to face. And even though the land is good and it's a big land and it's very fruitful and such, it says that they're concerned, okay? They're discouraged because these people are strong, the cities are fortified, and they're very large. And the idea of the word fortified there is like their walls go up to heaven, That's what they're just they're just blown away by what they see in the sense of what they're going to have to deal with. And they're afraid. They're afraid. Not all of them are afraid, but 10 of them of the 12 are afraid. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So it says they brought the people a bad report of the land that they had spied out. And they said, the land through which we have gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim as well. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seemed to them. So you have this group of people here, you have these spies that come in there, and you have Caleb, we know about Caleb. We find out Caleb is a very impetuous person there. He's kind of as he gets older here, he's 40 years old around there at that time, and he gets to be 85, and he wants to come in and take the land, and he says, give me the land that you promised me. I'll go in and take it right now. I'm as strong or stronger than I was 40 years ago. So sometimes guys are a little bit deluded, you know what I mean? I can still do what I used to do. And I'm not saying that, I'm joking. Caleb was ready to go for it. Maybe it's just, that desire was there. He had the will to get it done, So here they have this report, and we see that 10 of them didn't want to go in, and 2 of them did. I mean, it tells us Caleb, and we find out a little bit later on, that Joshua is in on all of that as well, too. And so it tells us that God had promised them this, right? And so here are people who had been delivered from the bondage of slavery. They've seen God perform these miracles, these signs that have been done. They had walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. They had seen Pharaoh's army get swallowed up by the sea behind them. And now they're in this land. They've seen God or heard his voice. They've seen him provide what it is that he's provided. And now they're going to get ready to go into the promised land that he told them through Moses, I'm going to take you out of here and I'm going to bring you into this land. And all they have to do is go in and take the land. So sometimes, brothers and sisters, there are some hard things that we have to do in life. We are saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, but there are still some hard things that we have to go through as believers. It's part of how God works in life to strengthen our faith and to teach us, right, in strengthening our faith, to teach us how to live in the promises of God. You go and read in Hebrews chapter 11, and you can see all of these heroes of the faith that we talk about. These people who lived with the promise of God that didn't get fulfilled, all fulfilled in their lives, but they still lived with that promise in mind. They still lived by faith, trusting God to do what he says he's going to do, even if he didn't do it in their plan. And God doesn't have to get on our plan. He doesn't have to do what we say when we want him to do what it is we want him to do. He's on his plan, and we need to get on his plan. See, that's the difference here. We live in a time when everybody's got to get on my plan. I can't believe how difficult it is to gather some people together, let's say for a meeting. Let's just use that well, I don't know if I can make it. I can't make it. I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. And we have the ability to communicate so freely, and we have all of these technological inventions to help us be more productive so that we could sit back and relax a little bit more. And we're more busy than we've ever been. It's very difficult. But you see, when it comes to the Lord, he doesn't say, you know what, are you available at this time? Do you think that maybe you could, fit me in somewhere in the next 2 weeks or something? No. He says, this is how it goes. And we're supposed to get on his plan. So here they are, these Israelites. They're getting ready. There's a promised land that God has promised them, and now they're afraid. Okay? They've seen what he's done. They know what he's able to do, but for some reason or another, and this is where we all live, for some reason or another, God is not going to come through in my situation now. For some reason or another, I'm fearful about what tomorrow holds. I don't know what it's going to be like. For some reason or another, he's watched over me all this time in my life, and I can go back and recount event, where God has saved me, where he's provided for me, where he's watched over for me, where he's led me into where he wants me to be. But right now, it's different. See, and it's not any different. Gina shared, she just said that God is the same yesterday, today, and always, right? So he's not changing. So if we feel like there's some big change going on, maybe it's us. Maybe we're not seeing it the way that we ought to. So saying all of that there, we learn to live in the promises of God, and those promises are what help us to move forward. Right? We need to move forward by faith. That's the big idea on the top of your note sheet there. Move forward in faith. It's the idea of moving forward in faith. And I'd like to say we move forward together as a church body in faith. And that just means that we're following as God leads. We're not trying to dictate and control where we're going to go, even though we try to do that. We're learning to yield to God and to say, okay, Lord, If you want to bring us through a pandemic, if you want to bring us through a financial crisis, if you want to bring us through a drought, if you want to bring us through a flood, that's on you. My job is to faithfully trust you to provide for me like you promised to provide for me, whatever it is I need. And even if you don't provide these earthly things, to eventually cross me over to be with you in eternity. Right? There's no promise that we don't get wiped out. And I don't say that in a way that, the enemy comes in and wipes us out. I'm just saying that financially or physically, we can get wiped out. When I was back in California, we weren't able to go to a funeral, but it was an online funeral on the drive back. But a friend of ours, I think I may have mentioned to you, she passed away. She was diagnosed with cancer 1 year before, and she didn't make it. She was younger than I am. So in a sense, I'm living on borrowed time, right? As we all are. So, we're not promised that. What we are promised is God would be faithful. He will take care of us. And that doesn't mean that we just limit his ability to work in what we see right now. So here it is. The people are there. They're facing this now, the uncertainty. They've seen the land. They've seen the giants. They've seen the crops there. They've seen the fruit of the land. They've seen it's going to be difficult. And now they're beginning to waver in their faith. At least 10 out of the 12 are. Somebody has pointed out that, everybody knows Joshua and Caleb. We name our kids after Joshua and Caleb. We don't even know the names of the other guys, or at least we don't name our kids after them. They are in there. I know they are there. But I don't know too many people who name their kids after them. Right? Because you don't want to be known as a loser. Right? You're a winner. So here it is. They're there, they're looking at the land. It says, then all the congregation, at the beginning of chapter 14, verses 1 and 2, then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night, and all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, listen to this one, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Isn't that interesting? We're going to choose the leader to tell the leader where we want to go. Right? That's how it is. That's how it is. So this is what they're trying to do there, and so they can't face it, and we're going to die out here, God, you brought me out here to die. I think I shared with you when I went to seminary and we were out there in Dallas, Texas, and we had never lived in Texas before. We didn't know anybody there. We're out there in seminary, and I'm flunking out of my first class, and I'm on academic probation as it is. And that's what I thought. The big question for me was, does God bring you down a cul-de-sac and just park you there? And just leave you there with no place to go? And I had the question there, what are you doing? This is not what we talked about. Okay? When I quit my job and uprooted my family from San Francisco there, that's not what I had in mind. What are you doing? And you feel like that. And that's what these folks are feeling. They're saying that, but they're exaggerating, right? Because he's taken care of them. He's watched over them. Right now they face some hardship. It is difficult sometimes, but we make it more difficult because we lack faith. What I mean by that is we're not willing to even own up to it, to take the step to do what it is that God has asked us to do. How many of you have ever gotten tired thinking about the work that you need to do, but you're procrastinating in doing? Yeah, and everybody said amen, right? And that's it, right? You get tired just thinking about it. It would be better just to get after it and get at it and be done with it, because then you feel better. Wow, it was much more terrible it's much easier than I thought it was at first. It wasn't as terrible as I thought it was going to be. And so here it is, they're complaining about it. And so they complain about it, and they complain to Moses. And it says there, Moses and Aaron, it says they fall on their faces. And I'm not going to read through it all because it's a lot of text in there. But it says there that, God is ready to be done with these people. He tells Moses again, this is the second time. He had done it previously in the book of Exodus up on top of the mountain. And he tells him, I'm ready to be done with these people. I'm just going to wipe them out, and I'm going to start all over with you, Moses. And Moses is like, no, God, that's not what you want to do. It's interesting. He can reason with God on this. And God knows what he's going to do anyway. Right? And so he says, don't do this, because if you do this, then the people will think that you weren't able to deliver them into the promised land, and that's why you brought them out here, and that's why you let them die out here, because you're not able to do that. And so God says, okay, well, I'm gonna deal with them. I'm gonna be okay, with them. But he says, there's still some consequences that are gonna come. And so as we continue to read on here a little bit, we find out that God promises them judgment there, because everybody is, they're rebelling, and it is rebellion. God says, go and do this. They say, we're not going to do it. And so here's what God promises to them, if you will, verses 20 to 23. Then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word, Moses. Moses had interceded on behalf of the people. I have pardoned according to your word. But truly as I live, and as the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers. And none of those who despised me shall see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. And it tells us a little bit later on that he names Joshua in there too. It's verse 38. Of these men who went to spy out the land, only Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh remained alive. So, meaning that God says this is going to be the punishment. And so we know that the discipline that God has, the judgment that he has on them, he says, we're going to wipe out everybody who's over the age of 20, except for Joshua and Caleb, and we're going to raise up a new generation. Now, this is the faithfulness of God. When you look at it, you got to think. God could have just stopped with that first generation, right? He could have just said, it's over. This people will not follow me. They won't be my people. They won't listen to me. They won't do what I'm telling them to do. Even as I show them my glory, even as I show them my power, even as I reveal to them, I'm able to provide for them whatever it is they need. They won't follow me. I can just cut them off and be done with them. But that's not God, right? God doesn't change who he is because we are disobedient. That's important for us to remember. Sometimes we think we're going to get our way by kicking and screaming, I'm going to twist God's arm and make him do what I want him to do. You're going to be the one who suffers for that. It's like your kids, There's an easy way and there's a hard way. If you want the hard way, that's fine. That's on you. It's not the way I'd like it. It breaks my heart to see the hard way sometimes, but sometimes that's how people learn. Okay? So here it is here. So, this is what God says. He said, this is how it's going to be. And it's going to be, going to wipe out that generation. He's going to raise up a new generation. He could have just stopped. He didn't have to keep going with them, right? But he's faithful. And sometimes we wonder, wow, is God faithful to a fault? Because he gives so many chances? Well, that's because who he is. That's his character, right? He's patient with people. He wants to give people a chance to turn from their sin. Sometimes it takes a while for people to even recognize it. And so here it is. He's working with these people. He's telling Moses the way it's going to be. And then it goes on here, verse 31 to 33. And he tells them, you guys were so concerned. You thought this was going to happen. We're going to get killed out here in the wilderness, and our kids are going to become slaves here to this group of people. He says, but your little ones who you said would become a prey, I will bring in. They get to go into the promised land, and they shall know the land that you have rejected. But as for you, your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness. And your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and shall suffer for your faithlessness until the last of your dead bodies lies in the wilderness. So he's not playing around at all. According to the number of the days, listen to this, according to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a year for each day you shall bear your iniquity 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely this will I do to all this wicked congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall come to a full end, and there they shall die. So that first generation, that's what they get. Right? They didn't want to follow after God, and he says, this is what it is, but I'm going to raise up your children. So he's still working with his people. He's still showing grace. He's still showing them that he is somebody who can be trusted. Having said all of this, when we think about it, here's one thing that we want to remember. Unbelief leads to consequences. Right? Our unbelief, our unwillingness to walk in the ways that God wants us to go. We can expect, we talk about God's perfect will, we talk about God's permissive will. And we know that somehow or another, in God's infinite wisdom, he knows how it's all going to unfold. But we don't. And this is his desire for us in certain areas. And sometimes we don't do what he desires for us. So he permits that to take place. We think, well, God, if you let it happen, then it must be you're okay with it. No, that's not true. God is not okay with all the sin that you see happening in the world. Why does he allow it to happen? Because we choose that for ourselves. We don't think there are going to be any consequences to it because we think we're okay. We'll be all right. But there's some consequences with unbelief. It doesn't mean that God is not gracious. He still is faithful to his people. And if it's not one generation, it will be the next generation. So he tells them that these guys, they know, they've seen all that's taken place, they've seen the signs, they've seen the miracles, and yet they're still this way. They won't move forward. They're stuck in the back, in the past. They're stuck from where they've been and what they have to do. And you can only be in that transition for so long. Sometimes God puts us in the transition from where we were moving forward, and we're stuck there, and we say, oh, how long am I going to be here? And he does that for a reason. Sometimes we're stuck there because we are stuck there because we've done it for ourselves or to ourselves. And so having said all of that, here it is. These guys were experiencing some consequences because they wouldn't trust God in faith to do what he said he's going to do. And so the question comes for each of us in our lives. Is there something in our lives where we need to move forward in faith with God that we're not doing? And I'm not talking about salvation for works. I'm talking about us growing in our faith. Which means that usually we have to think differently about things, right? We have to renew our minds, it tells us in the scriptures, if we're going to have this transformation in our lives. I think of that think differently, that guy who wrote that study there, and he spelled the word think differently, the two words spelled differently than we would ever understand them, and he entitled the study that way. Anyway, think differently, right? So the idea is that we want to move forward in faith, right? We don't want to be stuck. But the thing is, we want to control everything about our lives. We want to control what moving forward looks like for us. And we don't get to do that. You know, when I decided to go out there to seminary, I didn't get to choose whether or not it was going to unfold the way that it did. And praise be to God that it was much better than I thought it would ever be. Jermaine and I were just talking about it, how we had this fruitful ministry in this place where we signed a lease for 3 months. We didn't even know what the apartment building was like. We just needed a place to stay, and we found it on the internet in 1997, which is a lot different than the internet now, for those of you who don't know. You know, and God gave us a fruitful ministry in that time. It's not something that we would have ever imagined for ourselves. And we were just talking about it because we were reminded with a lease signing that just had to take place for our daughter Grace recently. So, what I'm saying to us is that we can't control what it is, what it looks like going forward and moving forward. We don't get to control how all that is. And control anyway is just really an illusion. You know, it really is. We don't really have much control of much. You know that, right? Just plan a trip and see what happens, you know? You'll know all about that. So the question is, can we trust God to lead us forward together in faith? And that's the real question. And we don't know what the future even holds. We just know that God is going to have us walk through some things in faith because that's just how he works with his people. So move forward in faith, and let's move forward in faith together.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes will not perish, they shall have eternal life. I shall hold to the cross. I shall hold to God alone, for his love has salvaged me, for his love has set me free. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes will not perish, they shall have eternal life. I shall wait upon the Lord. I shall wait upon his word, and by his grace I am released. By his grace I am redeemed. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes will not perish, they shall have eternal life. By his precious blood I have been set free, for the glory of Jesus' name. And I surrender all now to Christ alone. In Jesus I am saved. By his precious His blood, I have been set free for the glory of Jesus' name. And I surrender all now to Christ alone. In Jesus I am saved. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whosoever believes will not perish, they shall have eternal life. Yes, they shall have eternal life.
Thanks for joining us in worship. Have a great week.